Hello, everyone, and welcome to another physics lesson. And we're going to start with a new chapter, which is chapter 21. And this chapter and the chapter after this, we're going to cover all about magnets and magnetism. So, this chapter, chapter 21, is all about the basics of magnetism. What are magnets? What can they do? And what are the uses of magnets in the real world? So, let's start. So in this first part, we're going to talk about the properties of magnets, what they are and what they can do. So what are magnets? Here are a few properties of magnets that we know. A magnet attracts metals such as steel, iron, nickel, and cobalt. Materials that are attracted to magnets are called magnetic materials. And magnets have two poles, the north pole and the south pole. So this is all basic stuff that you probably have learned before when you were in lower secondary. If a bar magnet is suspended freely, it will always point to the north. And this knowledge is used to create the compass. The compass needle is a small magnet that is free to rotate horizontally, and it will always point north and will guide you when you are traveling somewhere. And the magnet obeys the law of magnetism. So basically, this law tells you that like poles, poles that are similar, will repel, while unlike poles, poles that are different, will attract each other. So that means north and north, it will repel, south and south, because they're the same, it will also repel. North and south, they are different, they will attract. South and north, they are different, they will attract. So this is called the law of magnetism. All magnets obey this law. Now that we've covered the properties of a magnet, what they can do, what they are, let's talk about how you can identify a magnet. So sometimes we have an unknown object. We do not know what it is, whether it's a normal metal, whether it's a non-metal, or it could even be a magnet. So how do we know whether an unknown object is a magnet? Using another magnet, we can do something called the test for repulsion to confirm whether an object is a magnet or not. So let me explain what this test is all about. Example 1. You have three unknown objects here, x, y, and z. So this is x, this is y, and this is z. Now we have to figure out which one of these three is the magnet. Is it x, is it y, or is it z? We can use another magnet to tell us about the unknown object. Right, so let's look at x first. Now x, when you bring a magnet to it, it attracts. So what is object x? Object x is probably a magnetic material. For example, steel or iron and so on. It could also be a magnet because these two things we know are attracted to a magnet. A magnetic material like steel or iron can be attracted to a magnet, but a magnet can also be attracted to a magnet. So X, we do not know whether it's a magnetic material or a magnet. It's inconclusive. What about Y? Now Y, as you can see, when we bring a magnet close to Y, the magnet and object Y repel each other. So the question is, what is object Y? Object Y is definitely a magnet because only a magnet can repel another magnet. If object Y is a magnetic material like steel or iron cannot repel magnets. So it's definitely not a magnetic material. Y is definitely a magnet. What about object Z? You can see when a magnet is brought close to object Z, nothing happens. So what is object Z? Object Z can't be a magnetic material because it's not attracted to the magnet. It can also be a magnet because nothing happens. So object X must be a non-magnetic material like plastic or wood because nothing happens when you bring a magnet close to it. Now, this is the test for repulsion. When it comes to finding out if things is a magnet, only repulsion will tell you, confirm that that object is a magnet. So attraction doesn't tell you much actually. Like for example, X, X is attracted to another magnet, but X could either be a magnetic material like steel or iron, or it could also be a magnet. We do not know which one of these two is X. So attraction doesn't really confirm whether an object is a magnet or not. Whereas repulsion, like in the case of object Y repels a magnet, and only magnets can repel magnets. So we definitely know that Y is definitely a magnet. So we use repulsion or repelling when an object repels a magnet to tell us that that object is a magnet. And this is what we mean by the test of repulsion. Let's do another example to again reinforce this idea for test of repulsion. So example 2, Adam has 4 unknown objects that he labeled A, B, C, and D. He wants to know which of the unknown objects is a magnet. He brought a magnet close to each object and recorded the results in the table below. So which objects are magnets, which objects are made out of iron, and which objects are made out of plastic. So let's look at this one by one. Let's look at object A. When object A meets the North Pole, it repels. And then when an object A meets the South Pole of another magnet, it attracts. So what does this mean? What is object A? Is object A a magnet? Is object A iron? Or is object A plastic? The answer to this is quite obvious. Because object A is able to repel a magnet, again, this is the test for repulsion. If an object repels, then that object is definitely a magnet. So object A is a magnet. Now let's look at object B. Object B, when it meets with a North Pole, nothing happened. And when it meets with the South Pole, nothing happened. Now because there's nothing happened, this must mean that object B is a non-magnetic material. So object B is the plastic. Let's look at object C. Object C, when we bring North Pole to object C, it attracts. When we bring the South Pole to object C, it also attracts. So regardless of which side of the magnet we bring close to object C still is attracted no matter what. So what is object C? Object C is definitely iron because no matter what, it is attracted to the magnet. Object D, again, when it meets with the North Pole, it attracts. When it meets with the South Pole, it repels. Now, because it repels, then object D is also definitely a magnet. And here, I'm showing you the full answer to these questions so that you can pause this video, copy this down to your notes. And that is basically it for this video lesson. So part 1, we looked at the properties of magnets, and we looked at the test for repulsion. So make sure you remember that magnetic materials are materials that are attracted to magnet, and these are steel, iron, nickel, and cobalt. Magnets have 2 poles, north and south. Magnets obey the law of magnetism. And what is the law of magnetism? It's a statement that says like poles repel each other, while unlike poles will attract each other. And finally, you need to know how to identify a magnet. We identify a magnet by using the test for repulsion. Basically, if that unknown object repels a magnet, that means that unknown object must definitely be a magnet. In the next video lesson, in part 2, we're going to look at this phenomenon called magnetic induction.